Hey everyone, Doug here. We're on set today taking a look at something very cool and exciting. This right here, Canon's brand new Cinema EOS C400 cinema camera. This is the latest in their Cinema EOS line, but this kind of takes inspiration from all of them in the lineup so far. There's a lot to discuss here, but right off the bat, the first thing you probably all want to know, this is a 6K full frame sensor inside, brand new design, and for the first time to my knowledge, this is a triple base ISO sensor. So lots of flexibility here to shoot in very interesting lighting conditions. It can shoot up to 6K at 60p in cinema raw light, which is really nice, and up to 4K at up to 120p in slow motion modes. The camera records to both CF Express and SD cards, so you have some flexibility when it comes to recording options, but in general, there's a lot that's been rethought here in terms of the overall body design, the grip, handle, LCD screen. There's a lot to talk about. We're gonna record a ton of footage here today, so let's get started. The body alone is pretty typical when it comes to the C series. You can see that we have all the main controls on the left user's side. One change that's notable though is the volume control, the gain control for the audio is now also here. So if you look at the back side, some of that has been moved. We also have all of our ports here. We're gonna go over it later. And on the other side, there's an Ethernet, some USB connections, the grip over here. Again, we'll talk about that later. The new top handle right here, very similar to the C300 and 500 where it slides in, lock it in, screw down the pins. Now the LCD screen brand new, but also Canon's kind of rethought the way that this mounts, the way that this articulates at different points. So you have 360 degrees of rotation in, I believe it's at least 4 different points. So we're gonna just mount it here. We'll keep it pretty simple for now. So now key here to the camera is the adoption of USB-C. There's actually a few ports on the camera, but the monitor, the LCD monitor and the grip actually connect through their own dedicated USB-C ports. So now this is interesting. If you turn the camera here, we can connect it right here. And there's actually a little lock. Gives a little more security to the good old USB-C standard. The grip is of course very familiar if you've used any of the previous C-series cameras, but this, like I said, uses USB-C. So we're gonna plug it right down here first. There's a right angle connector, goes right in the side. Fit it right on, screw it to secure it, and just like the traditional grips. Now, we have a few lens options. This is an RF mount. You can see this is actually something crucial on this camera. There's lens power support. Now I can't put it on right now, but we do have a new lens to talk about and we'll get to that later that does take advantage of this. For now, we're just gonna put on a Cinema Prime. So if I can get that Prime, we're gonna connect this right on. And there we go. And that is our rig for the day. So we're gonna set up a real simple shot here, just something with some like light cinematic blocking, maybe something lifestyle oriented. We'll have our subject come from the balcony outside, walk through the frame, come around onto the couch and enjoy some TV. So of course I'm gonna have to manually pull this. I don't have a focus assist, but we'll make it work. The key here really, what I wanna show you is the immense flexibility and latitude we have thanks to cinema raw light and the sensor's natural dynamic range as it is. It's a very tricky situation right here. It is bright noon light right now. So combine that with relatively dark interiors that we're trying to light up a little bit, and we're gonna see how much we can really get, not just straight out of camera, but also in post when we try to pull it up and bring the highlights down a little bit. Of course, I wanna keep it natural, so I'm not gonna make this insane grade out of it, but if we can maintain all the detail in those regions, then it really says something about the camera. And action. So what I'm setting up right now is a very contrasty, bright outdoor shot. You can see I'm in the shade, but look at my arm. It's very, very bright high noon light we got here. So I'm not going to provide any fill light to our subject. So He is still going to have some really deep shadows under the eyes. We're just going to accept that as it is, because we're really just looking at the overall latitude and the handling of highlights here. But what makes this possible is the built-in ND filters. That's one of my favorite parts of these cameras. Combine that with this very nice 50mm prime lens here. I'm not fully open at T1.3, but I got a T2.5 here, which is still pretty nice. That means I have a lot of separation, nice bokeh, and I'm able to keep it all, even at ISO 800, which is, by the way, the lowest base ISO of the camera. Bringing that down would artificially bring it down, so you would lose a lot of your highlight range in the dynamic range. So we're not going to do that here. We're going to keep it at 800 and just use ND to bring it down. So we're going to go for a take here and just see what it looks like. Right here, it's quite dark. We have some light spilling into the apartment here. The light that you saw in the previous shot is coming all the way over here, but to the camera, of course, it is very dark. Now, I said before that we have triple base ISO here. To be honest, I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to hit the highest of 12,800 in here, but we are gonna push it up to at least 3,200. And now what we have here, I wanted to keep it cinematic, but I think we should test some autofocus. We have a 50mm on here right now. This is the Cinema Prime. I'm gonna switch it over to the brand new RF35 f1.4 VCM. We have full dual pixel autofocus 2 support in here, and I do wanna have a bit of a track going on in the upcoming camera move, but at the same time, we're gonna see how we can just use the spilling light that's coming in here without any other light. We'll try to get a decent exposure out of it and also track at the same time. So let's swap this lens and see what it looks like. All right, so we're gonna go through a few things here. You can already see that we have AF active. Let me just turn it off for a split second. Have the normal AF assist tracking here just so we can see. Let's turn it back on. The exposure here is already set to 3,200. I'm gonna bring it down. So let's go back down to 8, which is the lowest base. I'm gonna roll on that just so you can see it in real time. And then let's boost it up again. So this is honestly not a terrible exposure as is, but I still think it could be better. And especially if you're doing something that's more lifestyle oriented, you probably want a nice bright image. So instead, I'm gonna boost this up to 3,200, which is the second level. Now, I have it set to auto switch here. So I have to cut here just so I can switch it. We're in 3,200 right now, but let me show you what auto actually means. If I go into the menu, now we have base ISO auto selection. Whoops. Touchscreen menu, by the way. And you'll see we have base ISO 800, 3,200, and 12,800. Now, what this means is that you can essentially lock the base ISO to a certain base. And if you want to use that for certain reasons, like if you want to get a cleaner noise floor in the shadows, that's one way to do it. In general, I would stick with auto just because it does allow you to kind of set it and forget it. So in this case, when we go to 3,200, we know we're at 3,200. So I'm gonna roll again. You can see the difference here, 32 versus 800. Scott, if you don't mind just looking straight ahead. Yeah, there we go. So, you know, he's getting ready for the day, making sure he looks good. And then he walks off camera. Except that's where he came from. So he's actually gonna walk the other way.
Oh, that way?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Also a good direction.
Some people get ready and then spend the rest of their days in their bedrooms. Let's do a version of this where we actually track him. I'm gonna show you this in real time just so you can see, look how quickly that picked up his eye. And remember, the AF tracker was here on his reflection before. It immediately finds him at the edge of the frame here. Immediately recognizes it's actually got his eye dead on. So what you're gonna see here is very interesting. It's gonna track him. Let's just show you in real time how this works. I'll talk over it and you can see exactly what the camera's doing. Go ahead, action. Comes in, camera immediately catches his head on the eye, and then also immediately catches it in the mirror and very smoothly back focuses over. Did no hunting at all. Looking good, looking sharp. All right, I think you're ready to go off for the day. Great. And cut. So we got some demos out of the way. Let's finally talk about some specs here. There's a lot to talk about. Let's start with autofocus because we just did that. Now autofocus is very interesting with this because some of the sensor design changes have improved the autofocus as a result. Basically, the wiring is now behind the photodiodes in the sensor, which means that it's opened up some additional area. And that means that Canon can now get approximately 100% coverage of the sensor for autofocus. Now that means that, of course, on the edge of the frame, as we saw in the previous example, it allows it to catch at the edge of the frame. So it helps in cases like that. In general, tracking performance has been improved, and we also have a couple of new AF detection types. You have animal and body detection as well in here. And that, of course, body comes after face and eye, so if it can't find those, it goes down to body, which assists you in maintaining tracks even when people turn their heads or disappear behind oblique angles. In general, it's excellent. Huge step up from what I'm seeing in the C70, which didn't have DP-AF2. This has it, so you really feel that change here. It's very reliable, very consistent, smooth, especially with this lens. So yeah, all good in terms of autofocus all around. There are also a couple of different options with the AF framing that have changed here. We have small zone, zone, large zone vertical and horizontal, along with the whole area, which is what I've left it in for today. Oh, and one more note when it comes to autofocus, the camera does support it up to 60p across the board. So yes, that even means up to 6K. You have 60 FPS autofocus support. When it comes to recording options, we have even more to discuss because the camera has a lot going on. It offers you 3 basic varieties, and we're gonna break it down right now. I have it in the menu here. Starting from the top, we have RAW HQ, RAW ST, and RAW LT. Now those are the 3 cinema RAW light varieties we have. These are all 12-bit options, so you always have, regardless of the data rate, the full 12-bit fidelity of the image. It really just changes exactly how much data is given to it, so it might be better for faster motion if you use HQ, or for very fine detail, but in all instances, even the LT, I've used it before, is still a very robust image. Talking more in the compressed formats though, for the easy deliverable non-RAW formats, we start off with XF AVC 422 10-bit. Now this is the MXF wrapper version that we've seen for years now. This is mostly what I use when I shoot on the C70. And of course it's gonna still be here for broadcasters who need that. But we have some new options. XF HEVC-S, 422 10-bit and 420 10-bit. These are new codec options based on, you can guess it in the name, HEVC. These offer you a couple of modern options with slightly lower bit rates, so you get a little bit more out of your cards. It's still very high. So for example, 4K at 24p is running at 135 megabits, I believe. So that gets you still in a decently high range while maintaining a robust image. You shave a little bit of that data rate off. And at the same time, it gives you some more modern decoding options if you're using newer computers to edit it. It actually, believe it or not, might be easier to edit this depending on your computer versus XF AVC. Now, we also have 2 more varieties of XF AVC. These are AVC-S as well. If you need that for immediate delivery, getting the most out of your cards, or if you just want to use it as a proxy format, it's there for you. Now this is a really big detail about these new formats, both in the XF HEVC-S and AVC-S formats. They are MP4 based. Now traditionally, we've been used to MP4 not having the metadata that MXF would, but that changes here. This actually does have a new version of the MP4 container here that has all the same metadata and the same naming structure as the MXF. So if you do prefer to stick with that, now it actually may be a much more viable and robust workflow to use. It's good to see here, especially if you do want to take advantage of those formats and the smaller file sizes while not necessarily losing those MXF benefits. All right, gonna do one more lens swap for the day. Lens has treated me well, but I need a little more flexibility. Here you go, thank you. This is the new 24-105. This thing is really cool. Sorry, 24-105 f2.8. I could not have asked for a better day. All right, I'm gonna test fate here. There is no in-body stabilizer here. There is a digital stabilizer, and it can be effective. It also has motion vector support to follow a subject. I don't have it turned on at the moment. This lens does have optical stabilization. I'm gonna try and just do this handheld, holding it low, and we'll see how it goes. Action. All right, gotta take a seat for a minute. We have a lot to talk about with just the body of the camera. There's tons of stuff packed into here, lots of buttons, inputs and outputs that we have to cover. Let's start right with the front. This is an entirely new design body. Like I said before, it borrows a lot from the other C-series cameras, and you'll see the similarities as I turn it around. But the first thing here is lens power right on the front. So you need that for things like Cineservo lenses, which I'm gonna show in a minute. And then of course we have some custom function buttons. One of them is pre-programmed as AF lock and the RF mount itself. I showed you the sensor before, so let's keep it covered for now. Let's move over to the user side, the left side. Most of the functionality can be found here. You have your ND filters right towards the front near the lens, your usual monitoring features such as peaking, waveform monitors, magnification. The key change here though, as opposed to the previous cameras, is the movement, the relocation of the channel gain. So channel 1 and 2 audio gain has now been moved to here, as opposed to the rear side. So almost everything is on the user side, including all the dials and toggles. There's a side record button, playback, even power and media switch. So let's go over to the rear now. The first thing that probably pops out, literally, is this BPA60N. This is a new battery. The BPA30N is the equivalent if you're looking at the smaller capacity version. Now, these provide additional power in the form of the lens terminal and also the multifunction shoe, which we'll get to in a second. Just so you know, you can use the previous BPA60 and A30. They won't provide power to those ports though, so just be mindful of that. The camera will warn you, but they are technically compatible. Right to the side of it, we have the very first port here. This is a remote port for a 2.5mm remote connection. And then we have a couple of function buttons, menu and cancel joystick. Dead center in the middle here, we have M4 screws. There's 4 of them, and this is intended to connect accessories. So usually from a third party in this case, let's say a battery plate that you could then plug into the DC input right over here. If we do look at these connections, we have a ton of them. So at the top, we have 2 SDIs. One of them is called monitor. Now this is a 3G SDI connection, so maxing out at 1080p. And then the one right below it is a 12G connection. So that's how you would get 4K 60 if you do want that. On the side is a USB-C connection and a 3.5mm headphone jack. Below that is a 3.5mm mic input. And back on the side, here's your audio inputs. This is my one only issue. They are mini XLR, but it's still good to have them. And next to that is HDMI out. Right below that, this is kind of interesting. You have these DIN connections. Now the one towards the right is for time code. And on the left, you have a combination Genlock, sync, and return feed. Now what's really cool about that as a return feed is if you are in, let's say, a multi-camera setup, you can toggle very briefly a view of the toggle a view of the return feed and see what the program feed basically is. So you know kind of what's going on in the main feed as well. Very helpful if you are in that kind of situation. And then right below that, of course, as I just said, is a 4-pin 12-volt DC in XLR connection. Moving over to the right side, we have the grip for the camera, very similar to previous grips. It is, of course, new and redesigned. As I said before, it connects over USB-C and also locks in on the rosette connection here. You have your main record button, iris control, joystick, and a couple more function buttons. By the way, there's 18 custom function buttons, I believe, or at least 18 of them are customizable. And then on the side here, you have your input line, mic, and phantom power switches. Right below that, this is crucial in a multi-camera or a streaming setup, is your Ethernet connection. The camera does support Wi-Fi or Ethernet for XC protocol control, so good to know there. There's way more uses for that I wish we could get into today, but it's a lot. So we're just gonna mention the connection. That covers the main sides of the camera, but let me flip this around and tilt it so you can see a little bit more of the top here, and I'll show you the handles. This has undergone quite a redesign as well, that and the LCD screen. The LCD screen is brand new. This is 2.76 million dots. It gets brighter than the C300 Mark III screen, so even when I was outside upstairs, I could still see it. It was challenging, I won't lie, but it was still visible, and I was able to gauge exposure pretty well. Now, this is articulated at least 4 different points in 360 degrees. So you have articulation, tilt over here, rotation over here, there's another arm here, more over here, And I think I'm actually missing one because it's locked down, but you get the idea. There's a lot of range of movement here. You can keep this in a more outward handheld orientation, or if you wanna throw it out a bit more and pull the rod out here for more director view, you can do that. And technically, you could even have it on the other side if you wanted to. As I said before, it does connect over a locked USB-C. The connection itself is pretty typical, but there's a little mechanism here to keep it locked in place. Now the handle. The handle itself locks in with these 3 pins straight onto here. You have multiple mounting points. I'm not gonna take it off at the moment. If you've ever used any of the previous C cameras, you'll know it slots in and there's usually an active connection on there. You have a couple more mounting points here, and then key to this is the multi-function shoe. Now this enables you to use a couple of accessories. As I mentioned before, you do need the BP A60 or A30N series in order to power this. But when you do, you can attach something like Tascam's XLR adapter to this to gain additional XLR inputs. So that can give you full 4-channel XLR driven audio. Or you can attach something like the DM-E1D shotgun microphone directly to the handle, and that powers right through it. So at last, I can show you the lens that I've been teasing throughout this entire video. This guy right here is the Cineservo 17 to 120mm T2.95 to T3.9. The range alone speaks for itself. This is a very, very versatile lens. Cineservo means you have the zoom rocker control. I'll get to that in a sec, but this basically can cover 99% of the shoots you're gonna get. 17 is quite wide, 120 is pretty far into the telephoto range. It's not, anything that's gonna get you super zoom levels, but that's gonna get, again, like I said, about 99% of your shoots could be done with this kind of range. What we're looking at here, this specifically is an RF native version of the lens, but it does come in a PL mount version as well, which you could use, and if you are using that, it provides Cook Eye and Zeiss extended metadata options. So it comes with all the things that you'd expect from a lens like this. You have your geared focus rings, you have the lens markings, you even have the rear focus control as well. And then when we talk about the optics, we're looking at 11 blades in the aperture and distortion correction that's done in camera when using the C400. The Cineservo unit itself is the EXS5. This is new. This has what you would, again, expect: standard zoom rocker control, an LCD up top, and power provided by the pins on the front of the camera that we showed you before. Now, going back to that mention of PL, Canon has now introduced this. This is their mount adapter PL to RF. This is their first party version of a PL adapter. So this is really nice to have if you have PL lenses in your kit and you want to use them on these cameras. This is the way to go. And then one more mention when it comes to adapters. Just so you know, the C400 is compatible. You would expect this, but it is compatible with the EF to RF adapter. But more interestingly, at least to me, was that it is also compatible with the 0.71 times focal reducer version of that. So you could use that if you are shooting in a Super 35 crop on this, but I am kind of curious how that would look like on the full frame view. Who knows, some lenses might fit it, but either way, it's good to know that you have that option. So that is it for our time today with the exciting new Canon Cinema EOS C400 and their amazing 17 to 120mm Cineservo lens. This is an amazing combo. I really wish I could have used both of them together, but the images that we got out of this, I was looking at them before, they're already phenomenal. And the control, when you combine it with some of the more recent lenses that have come out, is really astonishing, especially with autofocus enabled. And the functionality and ergonomics, I am familiar with it, but it still just feels like it works and it makes sense for these kinds of productions, because you do blend some of that convenience that you would expect more from a mirrorless style camera, but also keeping it well within the realm of a cinema body. And it's hard to beat a 6K full frame raw image that you have the utmost flexibility with in post. It's just great to have that on the table, recorded internally, CF Express cards. You have tons of codec options here. You have lots of input and outputs. So even though this is cinema focused, there's a lot to be considered here when it comes to broader production styles like virtual production or multi-camera production. There's honestly a lot of potential that we didn't even scratch the surface of here. So, look forward to in the future just seeing what this camera is truly capable of.
But that's it for our time with it today. I had a blast and I hope you enjoyed seeing what we shot. Let us know in the comments below how you would use both the C400 and the 17 to 120mm lens. I'm Doug with B&H, and I'll see you next time.